was in the shadow of the '84 Classic, which broke all the records. It established Rick Clunn as a god in bass fishing.
What Clunn did the year before was electric, and it created a lot of hype and anticipation for this particular event.
They had to shut the doors an hour and a half, 2 hours before the thing started. They were over their limit, and really kind of upset a lot of people that came from long distance away and couldn't even get in to watch it.
The patch controversy in '85 was really a big deal, and it's, I don't cuss, but I got into, I'll say, cuss fights on one end.
We felt like that was unconstitutional, un-American, and completely unfair.
All of a sudden, I got to the boat ramp that first morning, and they have Jack Chancellor laying on the boat ramp like he's had a heart attack or something. I didn't know what had happened.
There was even some speculation that somebody may have fired a shot.
Arkansas, the natural state, has played host to bass tournaments on many occasions.
Well, you know, Alabama could call itself rightfully the birthplace of bass fishing, but, you know, Arkansas could certainly claim to be the capital of bass fishing.
In 1985, Pine Bluff, on the banks of the Arkansas River, welcomed the top 35 fishing pros in the nation for the 15th annual Bassmaster Classic.
If I had to pick one state in my life that just has had more impacts on my life, it would have to be Arkansas. Great fishermen come out of there. Ranger Boat, of course, was there, and one of the premier beginning of bass boats as we know them.
During the Pine Bluff Classic, we were invited to the governor's mansion for a barbecue, and that was a big thrill to me to see the recognition given to the sport of bass fishing by the highest office in the state.
I remember one of the nights we went to Mr. Clinton's house and had supper. That was probably a highlight at the time. I mean, here you are going to the governor's mansion and you're having a neat feed.
When we got to the governor's mansion, he had penny loafers on with no socks, blue jeans, and we're all dressed to the hilt.
Scott had wanted us to dress up. You know, he's trying to make a big deal out of the fishermen. Here we are going to be governor's mansions. We need to have a dress code.
It would seem appropriate to kind of dress up a little bit if we were going to the governor's mansion, but apparently the governor didn't get the message of what the dress code was.
Yeah, everybody said, oh, tonight you got to wear it, you got to dress up, you know, you got to have this and that. We're up there in suit and tie, and he's out there just like we wanted to be.
I remember Clinton being there at the time. To think that someday he would be a president, and an infamous president at that, you know, sometimes you wish you'd have known what you know today.
Up next on Bassmaster Classic Yearbook.
What Clunn did the year before was electric.
The number one question was, are you going to go back to your famous Pine Bluff Harbor spot?
Obviously, he had shown us that the Arkansas River was capable of producing that type of weights, and so I think everybody thought that it could happen.
'85 marked the second time BASS has held its classic in Pine Bluff. The Arkansas River produced tremendous stringers in 1984, and the expectations were high for another repeat performance.
In 1985, we were very excited to go back to the Arkansas River and back to Pine Bluff.
Back on the Arkansas River, great place to go. Certainly a fishery that deserved a chance to go again.
I really thought going into that '85 tournament I was going to win that thing, and I was really on a bunch of fish. I think I have a better chance when we go back to the second time because I get, I got a better feel for what I'm going to take with me in the tackle box.
The more time you spend on the water and the more time you're there, the more confidence you have and the better chances are you to win.
I don't really think it mattered too much because the same group didn't catch them.
I didn't qualify for the Classic in '84. I'd made it, in '81, '82, and, did very well on those two. And then '83, did terrible and missed it in '84. But I qualified in '85. The only thing that concerned me is if Rick had won it with that many, it's going to take an awful lot of fish to win this tournament.
Of course, I knew the Arkansas River's history, and I knew that 50 to 60 pounds would probably
win, which meant you better be on a bunch of fish to win it.
That river is just incredible, and there's a lot of backwater areas and a lot of little duck ponds and places that a guy could figure out how to get into and jump a few logs and get back into some remote areas where people hadn't done a lot of fishing, and fish were basically unmolested, had time to get big, and that river's got a lot of potential.
27 pounds, 7 ounces.
It was in the shadow of the '84 Classic, which broke all the records. It established Rick Clunn as a god in bass fishing as far as that goes. So it was, you know, will it be a replay? Will you know, Rick win this classic too?
Following Rick Clunn's victory in 1984 would be kind of like trying to follow Bear Bryant at Alabama. You just don't want to go there.
What Clunn did the year before was electric, and it created a lot of hype and anticipation for this particular event. But I think what it did is it showed you can't go to the well twice. I think that place had been picked apart by the locals and been hammered, or maybe it was just one of those once-in-a-lifetime kind of deals.
Of course, the number one question was, are you going to go back to your famous, Pine Bluff Harbor spot?
My expectations were there would never be another catch like that. I knew his little spot, every knothead up there at Pine Bluff, had gone to the magic Clunn hole. His stumps up there had been pulled out, drug off. Fishing line was all over everything. There's no way he was going to catch any more fish out of that.
Certainly, I went back to it in practice, but I had to. I owed it to the spot. Even though I really didn't want to go back to it, I wanted to try to find something else going on because I knew it was realistically it's not going to win there. I knew the kind of water it was. I knew the kind of pressure it got. Unfortunately, after I showed it to the whole world.
The pressure was tremendous after he did that in Slackwater Harbor. People came from Illinois, Indiana, everywhere. I mean, there was a crowd of people on that little 5-mile half circle is what it is. It's 5 miles long and about 200 yards wide at the widest.
Well, Rick Clunn checked Slackwater the first day, but I think he knew that probably no single spot had ever got more pounded, after a classic than that underwater ledge. That underwater ledge was described so well, in Bassmaster magazine. In fact, they ought to make T-shirts that said, "I fished the Slackwater Harbor River." It's probably one of the two or three most famous spots in the history of bass fishing.
A hole like that's history. Everybody knows about it. It's on tape. You got boats watching catch them, so you can pretty much just write that spot off.
Obviously, he had shown us that Arkansas River was capable of producing that type of weights, and so I think everybody thought that that it could happen.
Yeah, the expectations were high. Almost everyone knew that the place where Ricky won the tournament the year before would not be any good because it's right there in town. Once everybody knew about it, obviously every time a fish got in that area, somebody's got a lure in front of it and going to catch the fish and take it out of there, and it wasn't going to be there. But yeah, the expectations were high for a good tournament.
Coming up on Bassmaster Classic Yearbook.
And you can't regulate us and change the rules in the middle of the game. He said, I can and I have and I did. So that's the way it is. And you're not going to fish.
The fishermen come to the point, look, okay, if that's what you're going to do, the guys that qualify for the Classic, we're not going to go. You go ahead and have your Classic, we will not be there.
(1985) was a year that just prior to the Classic, Bass legislated some rules against wearing your sponsor patches.
They were not going to allow the anglers to wear patches if the patches weren't the sponsors of the Classic.
Somebody at Bass had been receiving complaints from some of the sponsors of the Classic, and they felt it was grossly unfair for them to pay Bass good money for the sponsorship only to see the show with all these patches from competitors, non-sponsored competitors.
Before the Classic got started, I think we got a letter in the mail that Bass was not going to allow us to wear our sponsors' patches. That was almost something we couldn't accept.
We didn't know that when you first started fishing the qualifying events. And our contention was this isn't right.
You can't regulate us and change the rules in the middle of the game.
Bass was trying to rig it up where they would protect their sponsors, and the hell with the fishermen.
My thought was that it seems a little bit unfair to tell those guys they have to check their regular sponsors at the door and you can't bring them into the Classic, even though they've helped them get there.
80% of the fishermen that were fishing bass, they wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for their sponsors. You know, it wasn't the Classic sponsors that got them there.
But anyway, the decision was tentatively made, and I made an announcement that that's what I was planning on doing, and then I got all kinds of cane being raised.
We felt like that was unconstitutional, un-American, and completely unfair.
We formed a committee and got together, and we told them that, you know, we boycotted the tournament.
It wasn't anything complicated. We didn't have a fight or a boycott or threats. We had some talked about threats, but it was not a real concern.
The patch controversy in '85 was really a big deal, and it's, I don't cuss, but I got into, I'll say, cuss fights on one end with my buddy Ray Scott and Harold Sharp over the deal.
There was no give in it. Matter of fact, I had seen Ray just a couple of weeks before the Classic was to take place, and Ray said, I'm going to tell you, if you wear your patches, you're going home, so it's no use to even come.
The fishermen come to the point, look, okay, you know, if that's what you're going to do, the guys that qualify for the Classic, we're not going to go.
A lot of the press received phone calls from the fishermen saying, what do you think? You know, this is the deal. And several of us said, if that's the case, then there's no reason to go to the Classic.
I felt sure that Ray was steadfast on what he said. They would not rescind that rule. And I knew for sure I wasn't going to rescind my stand. So it was kind of a standoff.
I know Hank, I love him to death. But I suggest that there was not that big a rhubarb going.
Ray said, we'll take the next guy down, whoever qualified 41st. If he wants to come and not wear his patches, he'll come. If he don't want to come and not wear patches, we'll go to 42nd. We'll go down the list to 250 if we have to, we'll get the 40 top guys that will come and not wear patches.
This thing went back and forth until like 2 days before the Classic, before the water went off limits. Okay, it's a drop deal.
Once it got in the air, there was a stir about it. I called two people, and one of them was Forrest Wood with Ranger Boat Company. And I said, Forrest, I got a problem. I want to clean these guys up. The fishermen are gravely concerned and complaining to me about it, and I really feel inclined to not restrict them. And Forrest, and that old slow Arkansas man, I kind of pondered a minute. He said, well, Ray, I think you're doing the right thing. I think it's unfair. And that was the end of it.
I think that it would have created such a mess for them. And again, that it would have took so much away from the Classic. You know, it would have been such a controversy that they didn't want that.
Bass relented and changed the rule, and we were allowed to wear all the sponsored patches, and it's been a good situation ever since.
Up next on Bassmaster Classic Yearbook.
All of a sudden, I got to the boat ramp that first morning, and they have Jack Chancellor laying on the boat ramp like he's had a heart attack or something. I didn't know what had happened.
There was even some speculation that somebody may have fired a shot.
Overcoming adversity is a daily occurrence for a touring pro. Keeping your focus through those challenges is what wins tournaments. This was never so apparent than on the first morning of the 1985 Bassmaster Classic.
A lot of people don't realize it, but these classics aren't held next door necessarily to classic waters. The boats have to be towed to the tournament site, and sometimes that's an hour ride, sometimes it's 15-minute rides.
In the procession to take the classic rigs out for the launch in the morning at Pine Bluff, for some reason, somebody up front either hit a piece of metal, I think it was a part of a winch or a hook, and it had fallen off of the truck, and it bounced up, went through the windshield of Jack's tow vehicle.
There was even some speculation that somebody may have shot, or thrown a bottle, or fired a shot.
Seems like something fell off an 18-wheeler or something and bounced off the road and come through the car windshield.
We was on the way to the ramp, and I was leaning on the back seat of their, you know, like this, talking to the driver and Shirley. We passed this pickup truck. I don't know how it happened. I don't know if the guys threw it. I can't imagine how it could have hit the road and bounced. But anyway, all of a sudden, something comes all the way through the windshield.
It was a large winch hook. Flew out of a truck going the opposite direction. And it hit the windshield, shattered the windshield.
Splattered glass all over Jack and all over his press angler and the driver.
It come completely through the windshield, and glass just went everywhere. And I got glass, and it was my right eye. And I was afraid to blink my eye, so I put my hand on it and I just held it closed.
So when we got to the ramp, pulled in, first thing Harold Sharp did was try to get Jack to go to the hospital. Jack said, "I'm not going to the hospital, I'm fishing."
No way was I going to go to the hospital. I knew I had some fish, and I knew that if they was pulling water, that I just felt like I was going to catch a limit of fish.
And just happened to be an off-duty nurse there as a spectator. And she got us to lay Jack down, and someone in the crowd had some Visine.
And took a toothpick, and she rolled my eye up like he was opening a can of sardines, my eyelid. And she took a tissue and she just, picked those little slivers of glass out.
And she totally flushed out his eyes with Visine. And Jack got up and went fishing, fished all day and fished the tournament.
Nobody was seriously hurt. There were some nerves frayed, obviously.
Yeah, that would kind of tend to maybe distract you somewhat.
I think it just scared the fire out of me, and yeah, made me real nervous.
And Jack will tell you that his hands were shaking even by the time he turned the key onto that big Ranger. But it was just one of those off-the-water deals that these guys had to adjust to.
His fortunes turned around very drastically in that tournament. He went on to fish and then went on to win.
8 pounds, 8 ounces. He is the winner of the 1985 Bassmaster Classic.
Jack Chancellor certainly had the potential to win a classic and the talent to win a classic, and this classic being a summertime river tournament set up well for him and his particular talents. But he wasn't one of the guys you automatically thought of when you thought of the classic favorites. He just, he was just a quiet, unassuming guy who got the job done.
He was not just a guy that walked in off the street. Sure, he qualified, but he performed well in 2 previous classics. He had the credentials that was very competitive.
Jack, of course, is a little bit more laid back, was always a little bit more laid back than most of the tournament guys of that era.
I really think they thought I didn't have the ability to win it. I don't know why, I don't know.
People underestimate him, and Jack is kind of, doesn't move real fast. He's not slow, but he moves, just methodically and gets where he wants to in a time frame that suits him, but he's not in a hurry.
Now, Jack would have been a guy that I would have never guessed to win the river, but he found some fish on a sandbar, and it just goes to show you sometimes that you don't know everything you think you know. I would have given you 5 cents for that, but he ended up winning the tournament then.
Chancellor brought a whole new idea of river fishing. He was fishing a little thing that he called a do-nothing worm.
It was basically just what we call the Carolina rig today, a heavy 1 ounce weight, weird-looking little 4-inch worm with 2 pre-rigged hooks inside it. And he just really schooled the pros on how to catch fish and structure it with that lure.
Do-nothing worm did a lot for Jack and did a lot for the fishing industry. The do-nothing worm is not a razzle-dazzle, exotic-looking lure, but it gets the job done. So we had a champion lure and a champion angler, and they were a dynamite combination.
It was just a relief to do something that you've chased for that many years, for a few years. And as I said, that's the dream of every bass fisherman, is to win the Bassmasters Classic.
This has been a presentation of ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports.